welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing a mid-December wrap-up. I don't typically do wrap-ups in the middle of the month, but I've already finished 7 books, and I feel like that's a good amount of books to talk about in one wrap-up to avoid the end of the month wrap-up being long. Also, I'm really trying to complete my Goodreads challenge, which is 100 books. I have currently read 94, so I still need to read 6 more books, and I really think I'm going to be able to do it. So I figured I could just wrap up the first 7 books that I finished in December now, and then I can talk about the rest, obviously, at the end of the month. So like I said, I have already finished 7 books in December, and I'm feeling really great about it. I'm really enjoying most of what I've been reading, and so I'm just gonna jump right in and talk to you about them. I have a pretty wide variety here. I have some fantasy, some sci-fi, some mystery thrillers. I have a graphic novel, some YA, adult, a little bit of everything. So let's go ahead and jump into the 7 books that I have finished so far in the month of December. I'm not really going to talk about these in any specific order. I'm going to save the ones that I liked the most for the end. But first up, I'm going to talk about Chew, Volume 1, Taster's Choice by John Layman and Rob Guillory. This is a comic, the first volume of a comic series all about this man right here. His name is Tony Chew, and he is a cybopath, which means that he can eat something and he basically can get the entire history of that thing. Like if he eats a hamburger, he can tell exactly how the cow was killed to make the beef. If he eats an apple, he can tell what kind of pesticides were used on the soil to grow the tree that the apple grew on. He's a cop for the Philadelphia Police Department, but at the beginning of this first volume, he is recruited by the FDA to be an investigator for their Special Crimes Division. He's partnered up with another guy who is also a cybopath, and they are kind of charged with investigating all these food crimes. And each volume is sort of focusing on a different thing, but there is an overarching kind of storyline. This is set in the not too distant future where a bird flu kind of pandemic has outlawed the consumption of chicken. A lot of people seem to think that it is a government conspiracy, and so there is kind of that storyline in the background of all the other storylines. I don't typically like the first volumes of comic series, and I haven't really been reading a ton of comics in general this year, but I am trying to meet my Goodreads goal, and this one was already on my shelf, and I actually really enjoyed it. I liked the art style a lot. It is colorful and bold, and while this is kind of a gory graphic novel, obviously the guy eats things to solve crimes, and sometimes that also involves consuming human flesh. It still was really entertaining. I definitely think that there is so much to this world. I believe there's like 11 or 12 volumes to this comic series, and it is completed, so I think I probably will just go ahead and read all of them. My library has them all on ebook, so I can probably just check them out and read them that way. It was sort of like watching the pilot of a TV series where you're getting introduced to a bunch of characters and you're getting introduced to a bunch of storylines, and all of those things are going to be resolved over the rest of the season, obviously. And so that's kind of how it felt. Like we're getting introduced to all these different storylines and all these different characters, but we'll definitely kind of get all of those resolutions by the end of the series. This was fun. I would definitely recommend it. It's kind of an older comic series. I think a lot of people probably have already read it, but if you haven't read it and you don't mind some gorier type storylines, then I would definitely recommend checking out Chew. I was attempting a challenge where I read the entirety of the finalists for the Goodreads Choice Awards in the mystery thriller category. So at the very beginning of December, I was really just barreling through a bunch of thrillers. I read All Good People Here by Ashley Flowers. This is a pretty basic thriller. It's about a girl who, when she was a kid, her childhood best friend went missing for a short period of time and then was discovered a couple days later, and she had been killed, and her murder had never been solved. A lot of people believed that her parents were somehow involved. They never admitted to anything. There was never any evidence to support that, and so the case has just been a cold case for about 20 years. At the start of the book, the main character is moving back to her hometown to care for her uncle, who I believe has dementia, and soon after she arrives back in her hometown, another little girl goes missing, and a lot of the elements of the disappearance are very similar to her best friend's disappearance 20 years before, and so it brings up a lot of the memories of that case for her, and so she sort of gets caught up in the mystery of this new disappearance and possibly even solving her childhood friend's disappearance as well. I thought this was relatively fine. I didn't think it was anything super special. I definitely saw the ending coming a long ways away. I think that if you are not into mysteries, then this would be a really good one to start with. It's a pretty basic introductory mystery thriller story to read. I think the writing was pretty basic, all right. It wasn't anything to write home about, but it wasn't the worst thing I've ever read. You can tell that the author is very passionate about true crime because she pulled a lot of elements from very famous true crime cases to throw into this story. Specifically the JonBenet Ramsey case, I think, was a huge inspiration for this story. I didn't love it. Like, it wasn't like anything super special, but I definitely didn't hate it. I've read worse things. I've read worse thrillers. If it sounds like your thing, if you're a fan of the Crime Junkies podcast, then I would recommend checking this out, but it's not like anything super special. If you're already a fan of thrillers, then you're probably not going to find anything about this remarkable. Another thriller that I read this month was The It Girl by Ruth Ware. I'm not a huge Ruth Ware fan. I enjoyed The Turn of the Key, but I did not really enjoy The Woman in Cabin 10, and I DNF'd one by one, so I've had my ups and downs with her writing. This one also follows a girl who, at the beginning of the book, she is reflecting on the murder of her college roommate. When they were in college, she returned to her dorm one night and found her roommate dead. She saw who she believed to be the killer leaving the scene, and so a lot of the evidence that put this man behind bars came from the main character, and at the beginning of the book she finds out that this man has died in prison. It sort of stirs up all of the questions and mysteries of that night. There are people that believe that he was not guilty and that someone else committed the crime, and so she sort of gets dragged back into the mystery. It's told in alternating timelines, so we're reading from the main character's perspective in the present day as she's sort of re-investigating her roommate's murder, and then we're also seeing the few months leading up to the murder as well, when they were in college. The roommate is sort of this like manic pixie dream girl sort of character. She's the it girl, and I didn't really care for this. It was very slow paced. It took a long time for the author to sort of get to the point. I think she could have easily cut out about 100 pages of this book and it still would have been an effective thriller. Again, I didn't find the mystery super surprising. I don't know, I found the main character to be sort of annoying, and I kept thinking, like, why was she making all of these really bad decisions and why was she putting herself in these situations? It was fine. It wasn't anything super special. If you're a fan of Ruth Ware, I would say give this a go. But if you don't already love her books, or you're not like an avid mystery reader already, then I would say just skip this one because it's not anything great. Other than One by One, which like I said, DNF'd. This is probably my least favorite of her books. I haven't read everything. There's a few that I haven't read, but it definitely did not really do it for me in terms of mystery. Next up, I'm very quickly going to talk about the These Violent Delights duology by Chloe Gong. This is a YA fantasy duology set in 1920s Shanghai, and it's sort of a retelling of Romeo and Juliet. The two main characters, the Romeo and Juliet characters, are named Juliet and Roma, and they are the heirs to rivaling gang families in Shanghai. In this first book, there is a monster that's sort of loose in the city and is causing people to tear out their own throats. It's kind of a pandemic infection sort of situation, but it's caused by this monster. And so Roma and Juliet team up to figure out who's responsible for this monster and how to save their city and their people. Like I said, I'm not going to talk too much about this one because I actually vlogged the reading experience of reading both of the books in this duology in my previous video, so I'll leave a link to that down in the description if you want to go and check it out. I will say that while I did find this duology overall to be fun, fast-paced, entertaining, I did feel like it lacked a little bit for me. I think that the Romeo and Juliet elements could have been a lot stronger. I think that she definitely could have added more of that into this first book. I also don't think that this is a fantasy series at all. There's not really a magical element other than this monster that's terrorizing the city, and even that leans a little bit more sci-fi, speculative. I think it should have been marketed more as like historical fiction with a speculative sci-fi element rather than a fantasy story, because I don't think it's fantasy at all. Also, I think that she never really had a clear idea of the message that she wanted to get across. I didn't really talk about this in the vlog, but a big portion of this book talks about identity and like colonization in China. There's an underlying conflict throughout this series between the communists and the nationalists, which I believe is taken straight from Chinese history, but she never really developed that aspect of it as fully as it could have been. I think that the main problem is that she just had this idea that got a little bit too big for her and she never really like found her focus. But overall, I did think it was a fun duology. I did come to really care for the two main characters. I definitely started sympathizing for them, especially in the second book, which is called Our Violent Ends. I would recommend this if you're interested in Shakespeare retellings, if you're interested in this kind of like 1920s Shanghai setting, if you're interested in like a rivals to lovers sort of situation. But just go into it knowing that it's not like the most brilliant thing that's ever been written. There's definitely some flaws here, but overall it is a lot of fun. Another book that I finished at the start of December was The Martian by Andy Weir. This was on my 2022 TBR. Actually, These Violent Delights was also on my 2022 TBR. So by completing both of these books this month, I have completed my 2022 TBR, which is amazing. I'll have a video coming out in a few days, me wrapping up my entire 2022 TBR, kind of ranking them, reviewing them fully, so you can look forward to that in a few days. But this is a science fiction story all about an astronaut named Mark Watney, who after a failed mission to Mars is stranded on Mars and is just trying to figure out how to survive until someone could possibly come rescue him. The problem is that no one knows that he is still alive. Everybody that was on his crew believes that he is dead, so he has to figure out how to communicate with NASA to come and rescue him, and also how to survive for however many days or years it could be before he is able to go home again. This was popular a few years ago. It came out, I think, in 2014, and obviously kind of took BookTube and the world by storm. I didn't read it when it first came out, and I kind of wish I had. I wish I had been part of that like hype for it, because I absolutely loved this. It was so much fun. It really balanced the serious nature of his situation with humor. I think he also did a really good job of handling like the really sciencey aspects without making it too heavy-handed. I just had a really good time reading this. It was one of those reads that sort of had me on the edge of my seat. Every single time I had to stop reading it, I was eager to get back to it because I wanted to know what was going to happen. I wanted to know if Mark was going to be rescued. I wanted to know how he was going to survive. Obviously, his time on Mars is not perfect. A lot of things go wrong for him, and reading all of these setbacks and then also his eventual successes it was just really fun. I just really enjoyed it. I actually cried at the end of it. I haven't cried reading a book, I don't think, all year long, and this one definitely got me a little teary-eyed. If you are one of the very few people that has not read The Martian yet, I would highly recommend doing so. It's so much fun. After reading Project Hail Mary, I wasn't sure if anything would top that for me, and I definitely enjoyed The Martian more, although they do have a pretty similar structure and tone. But I definitely liked this one more, and I'm really excited to read more from Andy Weir in the future. I think that he just is a really great author. Yeah, like I said, if you haven't for some reason read this or Project Hail Mary, then I would recommend checking out Andy Weir's books. Finally, the last book I'm going to talk about in this video is actually the very first book that I finished in December, and I think I actually finished it on November 30th, if I'm not mistaken. I think I'd already filmed my November wrap-up. This is another one that I read trying to read the top 10 Goodreads Choice Award mystery thriller finalists, and this one took me completely by surprise, and that is Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. I actually listened to this one on audiobook, and then I loved it so much that I bought a physical copy off of Pango Books. Then, after finishing it and going on Goodreads and seeing everybody else's reviews for it, it seems that I am in the minority of my absolute love for this book. So this book follows Daisy Darker as she is returning to her childhood home, her grandmother's home, with her entire family to celebrate her grandmother's 80th birthday. The home is fairly isolated. It's on this little island, and after the tide comes in, they are going to be trapped there for about 6 hours before the tide goes back out. And at the stroke of midnight on her grandmother's birthday, they go downstairs to find her grandmother has been murdered. And every hour on the hour after that, another member of Daisy's family is found dead. It is a mystery trying to figure out exactly who was responsible for these murders and what exactly is going on here. It is sort of a retelling, a reimagining of And Then There Were None, which I absolutely do not like. It's not one of my favorite books at all, but for some reason this really worked for me. I loved it so much. I was on the edge of my seat every single chapter. We get to learn a little bit about this family's past. There are some flashbacks to things that have happened in Daisy's family in the past. Everybody sort of comes to this island with a little secret, and it seems like somebody in the family knows all of these secrets and is exploiting them to a certain extent. I just thought this was great. I read it in basically one day. I think that while the ending will be incredibly divisive, you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it, I thought it was brilliant, and I didn't see it coming at all. It's when a mystery can absolutely completely surprise me that I can give it 5 stars, and this was an easy 5-star read for me. I've never read anything by Alice Feeney before. This was my first book by this author, and I don't know if I want to read some of her older stuff because it has fairly mixed reviews. I don't know if anything will be able to top this, but I thought this was just fantastic, and I'm really glad that I read it. So those are all the books that I've read so far in the month of December. It's been a pretty good reading month so far. I'm really happy that I've managed to read 7 books, and I'm really hoping, fingers crossed, I can read 6 more before the end of the year. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video and what you thought about them. Do you have similar or different opinions to me? I'd really love to know. Also, let me know some books that you've read so far in the month of December, or maybe your favorite book that you've read in December so far. I'd really love to know that as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you again in just a few days. Bye!